Okay.
Okay. Okay. Hopefully I can hear myself. Good morning. Can you hear me? Caroline? 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 I got that right?
All right, Dan, welcome to the meeting here.
Hey, I'm here. Thank you.
Great. Well, let's just make sure your mic works okay here. It was echoing a little bit. Can you just say a couple words here?
A couple words. Good morning.
All right. Great. All right. Well, thanks so much for being with us, Dan. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. We're very excited to start this special event, the Songs of Hope Education Conference, and I'm really excited to present to you wonderful speakers this week and next week. Today we've got with us Dan Waldschmidt, who I've known for the last year, incredible guy, and I'll introduce him in a second. And then we have Barbara Bisceglia, who many of you know. With Rock and Roll Daycare, and I'll be presenting at 1 o'clock. So our format for these sessions will be from 12 to 2 o'clock from Monday through Friday this week, and next week, Monday through Friday. The session this week will be in English, and we will be having an extra third session in Spanish at 1 p.m. Starting Friday of this week and all of next week. So let me introduce to you Dan Waldschmidt. Now, Dan's someone I've known for the last year and is an incredible fellow. And Dan doesn't just talk about leveling up. He's obsessed with it. He set records as an ultra runner and has been the personal strategist for the leading business leaders of our time. He wrote a book called EDGY Conversations that accidentally became a worldwide bestseller, and he continues to share his insights from the stage as a keynote speaker and on his blog and podcast. Most days you'll find Dan heads down working on breakthrough strategies for his clients at EDGY Inc., a highly focused invite-only business strategy execution company based out of Silicon Valley. Well, welcome, Dan. So excited to have you with us today.
Thank you. That's a mouthful. I need to have someone change my bio, I think. It's a little boring. It's got
That's good.
I didn't know if video was on or off, so is it cool if I leave mine on? That way I can pretend
Absolutely.
like people are seeing me and all that good stuff?
Yeah, love it.
Awesome. And so will there be a chance for questions? Should I leave that option there for people who are here, or should I?
Yeah, we'll run our session so 40 minutes to talk, and then we'll take about 20 minutes at the end for Q&A.
Perfect. So so when you were asking me to speak, and one, I'm a big fan, of course, of what you're doing, both at Rock and Roll Daycare and of course Open Door Montessori, and your fingers are in like lots of different pies. I think that's a good thing, unless you're the person making the pie and don't want big fingers in it. But what I'd love to share with everyone today is a story that has made a big impact on my life, and it's something that I've started writing book number 2 on, and I've put the pause button on it because I didn't know how I would shape it, and now I think it's going to be book number 3. But before I tell you the story, I want to tell you a little bit about my background, because I think it'll inform why I think this story is so important. So I was raised by very Christian parents. from the time I was like a little tiny person, all the way up until the time I was 18 years old out of the house. So for many of you, I went to private school from daycare all the way up until the time that I was, I didn't go to daycare when I was in high school, but obviously I started young and grew all the way up. But one of the things that was peculiar about my young upbringing was that there was no TV in our home at all growing up. So for 18 years, I was in this environment where there was no, none of that. No sitcoms, no game shows, no football even on TV. I grew up in Northern Virginia. I was listening to the Washington Redskins game on the radio, right? So, that's the level of intensity. I only say that to say this. When you have to read a book a day and you do the math on that, for when you're 5, 6, 7, 8, I don't know how young I started, all the way up until I graduated from high school, you read thousands of books. Now, let me add another layer to this, because some of you, I can tell already, just from the comments and chats, you get where I'm coming from, right? You've either been in a very strict upbringing or in a family where you had to read a lot of books. My parents did not like for us to read fiction. I remember my mom getting so frustrated. She was like, "Oh, it's fake. You can't learn anything from fiction. It's a waste of your time." I'm sure there's a lot of literary teachers who would probably disagree with her, but that's mom. We all love mom. That's just how it is, right? So no fiction. So I was reading biographies, reading autobiographies. I'm reading stories, and some of them really old books. You could tell because, the binding was, torn up, and you look at them and it's like, oh, printed in 1930, 1940. I remember at 12, I had run out of books temporarily, and so my dad's law book was Blackstone Law. It was, I don't know, like 1,400 pages. I started reading some of this stuff, reading the dictionary, right? So I grew to love biographies. In fact, to this day, when I go running, I'm still reading about a book a week. I don't get a chance to read more than I just do to running a couple businesses and being busier than I was as a kid. But I still love reading books. In fact, right now I'm in the middle of reading Ron Chernow's book. He's the one who did Hamilton, by the way, if you love that show. He also wrote a book about John D. Rockefeller called Titan. And I'm thoroughly enjoying that. One thing I've loved about stories is I think for a lot of us, we get in these moments of times in our life, global times, like pandemic, COVID, it's funny, we're talking pre-COVID, post-COVID. And then we get in these moments in our time where it's deeply personal. And we start to think that it's only happening to us. We have these moments where we start to think, we're almost afraid to say it out loud, well, I would be as successful as I could be. I would be achieving my goals. I would be happier and more fulfilled if only, and then we fill in the blanks with something. Right in the middle of all of this craziness with COVID, my parents actually live in Tennessee. I live in South Carolina. That's where I'm at right now. I'm under house arrest like all of you. And right in the middle of this COVID, my grandmother, who's 91 years old, exactly 50 years older than me, passed away. And my Nana was amazing. She brought the whole family together. She brought all of us kids together. And so we realized because of the regulations in Knoxville, Tennessee, where they live, there's only 10 people allowed. And she's got one son who had 5 kids and 17 grandbabies. And so talk about having to, limit the number of people at a funeral. You're sitting here thinking, you're making choices of who can actually show up at a funeral. And part of you starts to think, like, why me? Why is this happening to me? Why is this, what did I do or what didn't I do? Or, why? So one of the things that's that I've always enjoyed about stories, the power of story, is that it transcends time. And that's why this story that I call the if factor is so meaningful for me. So if you're cool with it, now that I've given you an intro, that after reading thousands and thousands of books, and reading, so many stories, individual stories about a point in time, stories about, great people who succeed, achieved great things. After reading all their stories, the one story that stuck in my head is this story. It's called The F Factor. And it starts many years ago. In fact, the main timeline is about 300 years BC. So this is, let's say, approximately 2020 plus 300 years. So let's just say that's 2,500 years ago. I think if my math is right. And since there's a lot of teachers on the line, I'm sure someone will tell me if I'm wrong. 2,500 years ago, the greatest king who ever lived had a father. And I'm calling the greatest king who ever lived Alexander the Great. Because if you know history, then you know that Alexander the Great, he conquered all of the known world, and then in his mid-30s, he apparently gave up and died. And I'm sure that's not exactly accurate, but someone can fill that in on the next history test. But Alexander the Great's dad was a guy named Philip, and his title was Philip of Macedon. Philip of Macedon was kind of a genius of his time. In the old days of battle, you would basically, grab your battle axe or grab your sword. What's funny is in my office here, I actually have spears and swords. So don't ask me why, but in my sword, I guess it's conquest. You would grab your sword and away you would go into battle. The fact that I have that just next to my desk here should scare some of you, I guess. But anyways, in the old days of battle, you would grab a sword and you would take what you wanted, right? That's right. If there's a zombie apocalypse, don't come to my office. You would grab a sword and you would just take what you wanted. In fact, it was brutal. If you think about conquest in the days of old, they would actually not just take over someone's land. They would kill often all of the male children. They would burn the villages to the ground. Then they would do something that was especially mean. They would take salt, and they would put salt on top of the areas where you would grow crop. And of course, it destroyed the soil for so many years that it almost became impossible for someone to have a livelihood. The area was uninhabitable. But Philip of Macedon realized that this was not really sustainable. This was not a smart way to take on the world. And so he hatched this genius plot. He would go to a village with his men. He would get to the edge of the village and he would tell everybody who was there, okay, here's how this is going to happen. We're going to beat you. You know, because if you open the front gate and you look out, you see all these people, you know that we're going to destroy it. And it's going to be very unpleasant. But we don't want to do that. Here's how it's going to happen. You're going to be part of our kingdom, and your king is now like a junior king. He reports up to me, and I'm going to run, all of the land. And every year, you're going to send, beautiful daughters to us who are going to be our queens and our princesses. You're going to send us gold. You're going to send us goats or some sort of commodity like this. And you're going to keep doing what you've always done, but you're going to be just a part of our giant kingdom. And as Philip of Macedon rolled through Greece, there were these different city-states. And a city-state was like we might think of like as a state in the United States, or even smaller than that. It was like a region, like a large city, a large township. And these were self-sufficient little fiefdoms, little kingdoms that ruled themselves. And of course, you have this giant army, and it came to the edge of a city. Imagine if it came to the edge of your city, and it's standing there with spears in hand and swords, and they looked out at your driveway, and they basically said, so we're going to let you live, but we're going to be the boss of you. We're going to be the boss of you. City-state after city-state said, well, either I resist, and the richest king in the world, the strongest king in the world comes and destroys me, or, my life is pretty good. I go about doing what I'm doing. I live my life the way I've always lived it, and I might get to stay alive. That's a good trade, right? And for many of you watching, you're going like, I don't see a problem here. It's a little annoying having someone tell you what to do, but if you've got a parent or a boss or a teacher or someone running all the teachers, then you know exactly, we all have somebody telling us what to do, right? It just is what it is. City-state after city-state after city-state after city-state after city-state, Philip of Macedon marches his troops. Very few need to do battle. Very few times does he need to actually get those swords out and go swing them, until his soldiers came to the edge of this little city-state on the crag of a hill. And if you think about this city, it was called Laconia. When his men came to the edge of Laconia, this village wasn't even like a good village. It was like a village that where like the side of the castle was like falling off the cliff. And if you look at satellite photos, or if you go to that part of Greece right now, you'll see that it was kind of like undesirable land, but it was in the way of conquering the rest of Greece. And so his men came up to the gates of Laconia, and they talked to the ruler of the time, and they said, hey, look, here's the deal. You get option A or you get option B. And option A is we rule you, we tell you what to do, you do it our way. You send us some beautiful women, you send us some gold, you send us some goats. That's what it is. And the rulers of Laconia said, well, in this case, we think we want plan B. We don't accept that. This was a bit of a surprise, because previous to this, everyone had accepted the master plan, right? The greatest king who had ever lived, this wisest king, apparently now, because he's killing everybody or crushing it, right, without killing anyone. He's got all the money in the world because now he has all the fiefdoms. He's got all the soldiers because he's conquered everybody today. And now he rolls up to this little village on the edges of a cliff who says no. Now, you may be thinking, well, apparently Philip of Macedon got his swords out and he went to battle and he took that. What's interesting is Philip was wise. Instead of immediately getting hot-headed and, that cartoon where you see smoke blowing out the ears, instead of immediately blowing his top, he thought, I'm going to make a show. According to Herodotus and the other the historians of the day, Philip of Macedon came to the edge of the city again, and his horses galloped along. And they were those horses like you see in the movie, right? The all-white horse with a purple robe covering it. And like on the top of the head, he's got the feathers. And on the saddles, there were jewels. According to Herodotus, there was even a golden chariot pulled behind it, bouncing up this kind of rocky hill to the edges of this city-state. And they delivered a message from Philip of Macedon. Slowly, as their horses came into the middle of the city-state, they slowly got off of the horses, slowly stepped out of the chariots. And then they delivered a piece of parchment to the leaders of Laconia. Now, I have to, edit this or make this PG friendly, because I think Chris would be unhappy with me if I went too far off the reservation here. But essentially, on this piece of paper, it said these words. It said, consider, if I conquer you, I will hurt all of your women, I will kill all of your sons, and I will subscribe all of your male men to my army. Essentially saying, this little city-state would be gone forever. Consider, is what he said. Consider, if I beat you, a lot is going to go wrong for you. Well, that should have been the end of the matter, right? I mean, you've got the richest king, the strongest king, now in the middle of your township, on horses, beautiful purple diamonds, robes, on top of saddles. It looks great. You've now had your ambassadors deliver this message. It says, listen, I was nice before, but I really want you to know, I have the money to crush you completely. When the ambassadors came back to Philip of Macedon, on that piece of parchment was a single word. And it wasn't no, and it wasn't yes. On that piece of parchment that was delivered to Philip of Macedon was one simple word. It was the word if. If. Here's what I find so fascinating about this, which it's like let that sink in for like a quick second. If. Here's the beauty of that. Every other township, city-state, region, mini country that Philip of Macedon had rolled up to had assumed that Philip was the wisest, the smartest, the boldest, the richest, the toughest, that he was automatically stronger than they were and he was going to beat them. Here, this little town of Laconia says, if. See, it's a message that Philip of Macedon didn't say, I'm going to crush you. He said, if I beat you, here's all the bad things that are going to happen. But by the way, I probably should have told you something else, because it's not fair to leave this part of the story out. See, today, this little part of Greece, we don't call it Laconia anymore. By the way, if you're an English nerd like me, because I do a lot of writing, right, you'll know that the word laconic comes from Laconia. And laconic, if you're not going to go Google that or Wikipedia it, simply means like brief, short, right? Laconic means instead of saying a long sentence, you say like 2 words, like short. And true to form, when you get a whole message delivered back to the strongest, richest, most powerful king in the world, and it has the word if on it, you know that's the definition of laconic. But we don't call it Laconia today. In fact, this little city-state is popular under a different name, because we think of this region as a different place, right? We call it Sparta. See, as times have changed and people have come and gone, there are those who see the world through a different lens. While things are melting down, while bad times are happening, there are always those who can rise up in the moment and say, what if this situation isn't as bad as we think it is? What if the obstacle I see isn't something to hurt me, but something to make me stronger? I'm not a big fan of TV preachers, but Joel Osteen has this phrase in his books, in his webinars, in his online sermons. I guess I don't follow much of them, but I heard him say this phrase, and it stuck with me. He says, what you go through, you grow through. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that, because I've met some people who constantly go through a bunch of crap and they never seem to learn from it, right? I know that's none of you watching, or no one you know in your family or community or school, but the people who always have bad things happening to them and they just never seem to learn from it. But the reality is that what we're going through is an opportunity for us to grow. It's an opportunity for us to show that we're stronger together than the obstacles in our way. And the first thing that needs to change in order for you to grow from what you're going through is this matter of perspective. Often we see things through the lens of it doesn't make sense to us, so it shouldn't make sense to anyone else. This happens easily in politics. It's very easy now with the current president that there are very clear lines. You're for or against. It's very rare that you have someone in the middle of the road, right? In fact, this is probably a topic we don't even discuss at Thanksgiving or at other places, because we're not sure what side someone's on, so we immediately just stay out of this entire conversation. But the reality is perspective shapes how you see the world. The easiest example of this is how your head is facing. You ever see someone with their head down and they're looking at their shoes? There could be the most beautiful sunset in the world, they'd never see it, right? There could be the most beautiful picture, most beautiful house, most beautiful scene, they'll never see it. To them, it didn't exist. On the other hand, you got someone whose eyes are up and they're looking and they're in awe at what's around them. And for them, they may be kicking some stones and maybe even tripping over a few sticks, but they see the bigger picture because their perspective is up. I spent a lot of my life in Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. area. And if you're wondering, I mean, for those of you in the Boston area, I'm sure you know all about traffic, but I lived about 18 and a half miles outside my office in Washington, D.C. Every day, it would be about an hour and a half commute to the office and then an hour and a half commute back every night. And for all the craziest reasons, sometimes you'd be right in the middle of downtown, you're leaving, and all of a sudden, traffic would just, boom, slam to a halt. And then you never knew why. Sometimes you hear woo, 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 woo. It was bells and whistles and sounds, and all of a sudden you'd see, a UN official to flash by, or the President of the United States fly by, or, the Vice President, someone from Congress who had a presidential or escort service of motorcycles safely shutting down traffic and shooting them out of the city. Now, here's what's interesting. Your perspective shapes how you view obstacles in your way. That's how it worked for the Spartans, for the Laconians. Imagine I'm at that traffic jam. I'm in my car, and all I see around me are other cars. I'm sitting in the middle of a street surrounded by skyscrapers, right? And all I look around and I see is no cars are moving. I'm probably angry. All of you are probably frustrated, angry, and annoyed, right? They're probably, even if you're listening to a good book on tape, even if you're listening to a great Who Did It podcast, right? That seems to be the craze right now. Even if you're doing something you're enjoying doing, you're probably frustrated that you're not getting to where you want to be. But let's think about how perspective shapes us. In my office in DC, I think I was on the 14th or 15th floor of this office. Now, looking down at the 14th, I may look 3 blocks down the road and see, oh my gosh, there's been a horrible accident. And it looks really bad because there's lots of fire engines and there's a couple ambulances. And now, whereas the Dan in my car was frustrated, the Dan 14 stories up in the skyscraper looking down now is not angry. He's concerned. He's empathetic. He's wondering, and this is the first reaction from all of us, is everyone okay? So how do I get a better perspective? How do I find those if moments if I find myself in a situation where I'm frustrated and concerned? The first way to do that is to elevate your perspective. A simple way to do that is to raise your eyes physically, right? Get up, walk around, get your heart pumping. It's a good way to elevate your situation and feel a little bit better about where you're at. Number 2 is get a higher perspective. How do you get a higher perspective? Well, for me, it's been the benefit of books. Benefit of, if you think about it, someone can take 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, sometimes longer, taking everything they've learned about a subject and smashing it down into 300 pages that you can read in a week. Think about that. A year's worth of knowledge in 3 weeks. There are online courses. Every course that MIT shares publicly in their public curriculum is available for free. You won't get a degree, but you can complete them online, right? Just looking at YouTube for new ways to do things. There are people offering courses. A lot of this is free. Programs like this, where someone says, I want to give away knowledge and insights from thought leaders. All of this is around us, and it's available to us if we look for it. I often say that inspiration is the one thing we lose just after we stop looking for it. Can I say that again, in case you were busy typing or scribbling notes or texting something to your friend? Inspiration is the one thing we lose just after we stop looking for it. So the challenge for all of us, right? The challenge for each of us is how can we search for inspiration? How do we elevate our thoughts? It's not just books and information and as I see in some of the notes, Udemy, Coursera, these other places where now what's funny is there's Mind Valley, there's all these places where you can go in and learn everything from how to be a better parent, meditation, mindset, things like this that will help you elevate your perspective. So instead of being in that car, stuck, angry as you look around at the ground level, you're up. And when you're up, when you're elevated, you can see more. And when you see more, you have more clarity. It's been said by some really, really smart people that most of us don't want to be happy. We just want clarity, meaning you're willing to suffer, have an illness, have a frustration at work, as long as you know what the outcome might be. It's the unknown, it's the uncertainty that for most of us is crippling. It's that lack of clarity that makes most of us go a little bit nutty. And so when we elevate, I can see a lot more. As a trail runner running these 100-mile races through the woods, the most frustrating part is being stuck in the woods, just weaving back and forth. And you're assuming you're going somewhere, but you're not really sure how far. You look at your watch and you're like, I'm not really going too fast. I wonder where I'm at. And then every once in a while, you can feel it because the wind picks up and the trees, which are, used to, way higher than you. Now you're as high as the trees. You feel the wind whipping up and you can see now for miles and miles and miles. And so when we don't know what to do, when we're not sure of how to get around the obstacles in the way, we have to elevate. We can do it with courses and books and knowledge. We can also do it by quiet time. How many of your best thoughts have come from the shower? Or when you're walking? Or when you're just sitting on the front porch doing nothing, and all of a sudden you realize you've had a great thought. The thought to fix all of the problems came to you when you were doing nothing. If we don't leave space in our lives for nothing, we get nothing. We have to leave room for creativity to happen, for ideation to happen, for imagination to happen. And what happens is that our brain uses those quiet moments where we're not, running from thing to thing to fill in the gaps with the bits of awesomeness that define us. The third thing I'll leave you with, and I see I'm running out of time here quickly, is that we have to choose people who challenge us, who make us better. Most of us, if we're honest, have people in our lives right now who do nothing but tear us down. What makes it even worse is that we will fight to keep these people in our lives. That doesn't make sense. We'll fight to stay in a screwed up relationship. We'll fight to attend a church or religious gathering where there are people who make our stomach turn over, right? Who make us feel uncomfortable. And then we will avoid doing things where we feel empowered. I often tell our team members, I don't want to be around people who keep my feet on the ground. People say, "Oh, I'm here to make sure you keep your feet on the ground." I don't want to keep my feet on the ground. Tell that to the eagle. I'm here to keep your feet on the ground. He's going to peck your face off with his beak. His goal is to soar. His goal is to fly. His goal is to champion the air. And that's what I want for me. And I know that's what most of you want for you. But yet, we surround ourselves with people who actually brag to us, who actually think they're providing value to us because they're keeping our feet on the ground. And you can't elevate if you're stuck on the ground. So my challenge to you today is a couple fold. Just because things look bad, just because it looks like the money and the power and the problems are all stacked up against you, remember the story of the Laconians. Remember how one word changed the course of human history. And here's how it changed the course of human history. One thing you may not know is that when Philip of Macedon got that parchment back that said if, he had a couple choices. And he chose smartly because of all the city-states in Greece, Laconia was the only one that Philip of Macedon never set foot inside again. Can you believe that? This tiny little city-state against the greatest king who ever lived with all the money and all the beautiful women and all the goats and all the things that they were paid to him each year. The only city-state he didn't set foot in was Laconia. Now, let me take it one step further because I think this is beautiful. When his son Alexander the Great came along, he did something that no one else had ever done. In fact, he conquered India. Now, according to history, he didn't hold it for long. King Parthos of India had elephants. Now, imagine if you're a fighting man versus elephant, and you spend your whole years, you're getting in shape, you're like an MMA fighter, you're working out, you're hitting, you're swinging the sword, you're doing all this stuff, only to lose your life because an elephant steps on you and squashes you. That's got to be humiliating. That's got to be, not cool in the language of fighters, right? You spend your whole life crafting the art of being a killing machine, and then you get smashed. So what happened was, as all the different conquerors came to the edge of India, they stopped, and none of them went into India. But Alexander the Great was one of the wisest kings. In fact, he gave a little speech to his men because he had been warring for 10 years. And his men said to him, Alexander, like, we've conquered everything. We've acquired money along the way. We've acquired beautiful women along the way, but it's been 10 years. Alexander the Great stood up in front of him. And he said to them, we are gathered together to decide whether upon your judgment we shall go back home, or whereupon my judgment we shall go forward. He then said to his men, I will make those who go the envy of those who stay. Telling his men, look, you can stay right here and not go into battle, but for those who go with me into battle, into India, I will make you the envy of everyone else. His men clanged their swords on their spears, and they went in and they took this land, man versus elephants. But that's not the ending. That's not the ending. Alexander the Great, he conquered the world. He conquered elephants. He conquered India. He never set foot inside of Laconia. Now, I don't know. I'm going to make this next part of the story up. But I imagine around some sort of a fireside chat at Philip of Macedon, around a fire, and maybe there were some hunting dogs there in the castle. And Philip of Macedon told his son, come here, Alexander, come up, sit on my lap or sit next to me. And said, basically, look, you got to be smart, son. There are some people we just don't mess with, right? There are some people that they're just too crazy. They're just too committed. They're just too driven. They've just elevated too high for us to take them on. Alexander the Great never set foot inside that small little country of Laconia. And it all started with a simple word. So my challenge for you today, as I wrap up here, is very simple. I'll toss it back to you, to Chris. Very, very simple, very, very simple, is that what's happening around us and for us doesn't define us. It makes us stronger, and that's a choice. It's a choice of perspective. It's a choice of actions. It's a choice of attitude. We can't always control the first thought that goes through our heads. Fear is natural. Panic is natural. Frustration is natural. But what you do once you decide, you find that in your head, in your brain, in your life, is now on you, and it's now on me. So my challenge for us is if. What if this isn't here to break us, it's here to make us better? What if you're not as weak as you thought you are? What if this financial test that we're all going through, from paying employees to getting paid ourselves, what if that is a moment that allows us to have the next breakthrough for creating thousands and thousands of financially competent, financially successful people all across the globe? And so that's my challenge with you. What if? What if? What if it starts even this week with this conference? How cool would that be? There's a bell I can go on or something, but you're in, Chris.
That was awesome, Dan. Thank you. Thank you. I love your shirt.
You bet. Thank you. Yeah, no, it's just running. So I have like a 900 running shirts. So.
No, it's so inspirational. Wow. I'm going to post up in the chat engine here Dan's website. Dan runs a wonderful blog with weekly content. I just love your stories, Dan. You're just a gifted storyteller, and that was wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing. Well, we'll take a time for questions for Dan here. So if you want to write your question in the chat engine, we will answer it. So while you're thinking up of questions, I will put the website for Dan in here as well. There it is.
Just follow me on YouTube. I should keep YouTube up more. I haven't. Just been too busy putting out fires.
Well, I've got a question for you, Dan. How does this impact your life?
A lot. I run a couple companies, and look, paying our employees is tough. And like you, it's like, what are you going to do? It's our job to help our clients not be panicked, and a lot of them are. And so we've shifted everything we do in a very short time period, in a very a short time window to help them be successful. So we're helping them fill out loan paperwork. I mean, that's not what we were hired to do, but things like that. And so it's forced us to kind of rethink who we are and what we do. I was telling my partner the other day, I'm a little bit stubborn, and so this may not be the best advice for all of you listening, but I would rather, run at the wall as hard as I can and have the wall take me down than I would to be timid about it. And so that's kind of how I am right now. It's like we're working as hard as we can, sometimes 16, 20-hour days, to just make sure people have all the love and the care and the attention they need. And if they're slow in paying us, that's probably natural. We'll figure it out. So my belief system is I'll figure it out. When I'm supposed to know, I'll know, right? So, yeah. But that's not automatic. Some of you think, well, that's great. I mean, look, interspersed every morning at 3 a.m. I'm waking up stressed out and thinking, like, what if this is the day it all ends, right? I think that's natural. But what we do about it is what determines us.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, it looks like we have a question here from Emily. How do you think educators can live that if in the uncertain and frankly scary climate of COVID-19?
So there's a whole nother set of stories around this, Emily. So great question. Now that you know that Laconia is really Sparta, you'll know that the Spartans lived their life. In fact, there's another word, Spartan living, which usually means bear or minimal, things like that. And I'm not going to Marie Kondo you, but there is something to be said for living prepared for moments like this. So I had the privilege of helping some 400 principals in Maine. And one thing I noticed when talking to them at their annual conference was that most of them spent very little time for themselves. I find this with doctors. I find this with educators. I find this with a lot of people who give care to others, is that even in our company where we're giving care to our business clients, is that we spend time helping everyone else and often not helping ourselves. This morning I was in the middle of a couple meetings and I stepped away, went to my quiet space and for 30 minutes did some meditation. So I would say, how can you be that if? It starts on the inside first. It's not some macho, thump your chest. It's more of this quiet reassurance that no matter how tough life is, you're tougher. And not because you know it, but you believe it. And I think if you can build the internal muscles of belief, and that comes from quietness, it doesn't come from being loud and boisterous and braggadocious. It comes from meditation. It comes from reading. It comes from great friends who stimulate you and challenge you. Those are the things that I think help you have your own if moment. By the way, and I was talking to one of the principals who said to me, "There's no time. There's no time for me. I've got so much to do." I was like, "So can we try an experiment? Could we try that at sometime during the day? Let's pick a date. Like pick a time, 1 p.m. All you do at 1 p.m. is, exit out your front door of the building. You make one circle around the entire outside of the building, and you come back in. That's all you do. And then maybe you do that for a week, and then you do it twice. And now that 3-minute journey becomes a 6-minute journey. And then what happens is people learn that, guess what? For 3 minutes, you're working on you. And then for 6 minutes, you're working on you. And I think that's what's amazing is, eventually people will learn that taking time for you is so helpful. So I see someone saying, do you give advice for get ready for different education, like online education with whatever tech? Yeah, I mean, so here's my thoughts about this ascent towards where we're at now. And I'll give you more of a business perspective, and then I think it applies to education. The in-person butts in seats education is not going away. It's just not. Nor is it the case that when we go, every business meeting is going to be on Zoom like this right now. I hear people say, oh, business meetings are going away. We're all going to Zoom. Just not the case. It's never been the case. We've had telephones, but we still do in-person business meetings, right? We have railroads. We have airplanes. Roads and airplanes get us there. But we've got video calling. We've got all this fancy technology, yet we still pursue that human touch. And there's many people, I, for one of them, I learn in a more of a laboratory sort of setting where I can grab my hands around it and touch it and feel it and do something with it. Many people, my older brother was like a genius, missed one question on his SAT, that sort of guy. Imagine being number 2 behind that, right? But he could read something and got it. I couldn't just read it. I would have to read it, maybe say it out loud, think it, draw it, and then I got it. And so I think, yes, it is smart to be online. I think there's going to be a lot of people now, figuring out that there is this online community. But I also feel like, applying some of that technology back to the classroom could make the experience a little more engaging. I just am not the one who's sold on the fact that all business meetings are going away, all conferences are going away. I think there's a bit of a pendulum swing that's one way because we're forced, and it'll normally in business swing back the other way. And so I think that pendulum swing is just normal, just life.
Now, Dan, great question here from Jess.
There's a great question from Jess here. Why do you think people don't look up to see the bigger picture knowing they should?
Because the empathetic answer is because life's hard and it breaks you at times. That's probably the most honest answer. It's just hard. It's the burdens build up and they're on your shoulders and the back of your neck, and you find yourself looking down because there's lots of pressure there, and it's a learned practice. It's not something that comes natural. Just stop and take a breath, and then proceed to look up. That's not natural, right? That's learned behavior. And so if you've not practiced that set of skills, then what happens is when life piles on your shoulders, you become the camel that you like hoping there's not that one extra straw. Instead of saying, let me take some moments, blow out some breaths, and kick some of the straw off my back so that I can look up and see it. There's a couple rules that I have when I still struggle with depression, and I think running helps me keep the crazy chemicals in my body balanced out. But the reality is I make rules. So when I'm feeling down or depressed and it's unmanageable, by just telling myself to look up, don't make any impactful decisions for 24 hours, right? Give yourself a chance to come out the other side of that. It's learned behavior, right? I see Amanda says, how do you deal with individuals who always have a negative personality regardless of the positive around them? So here's my thoughts on this subject, and I've written many articles about this. Some of them have had as many as 30 million views on this. So let me just give you my perspective, and then you can tell me maybe if I'm seeing this wrong. I think you avoid negative people at all costs. Period. End of thought, end of phrase, end of sentence. But let me clarify. Let me explain that. So it's like poison. How much poison would you like on your apple? Like, let's say the apple is like 90% good. Is it okay that it has 10% poison in it? Most of us would go, no. Okay, well, let's go smaller. What if it only has 5% poison on it? Is it now still good? What if it's got 1% poison? Are you willing to eat the apple if it has 1% poison? Most of us, if we drop, a cookie or a sandwich on the ground, we're, even if we're, even if, I don't know, most of us would throw it away. When you're young, you blow it off. When you get older, you're like, ugh, crap. You got to make a new sandwich, right? Because we're not even willing to have a little bit of dirt on our food. Yet we'll have friendships or relationships that are full of mud, full of poison. So a couple things. You're thinking, well, that's not practical. Well, a lot of life's not practical, right? But it's a matter of you staying healthy, mentally. So what does that mean? Well, that means if that person is in your workspace, you may need to avoid them. How do you do that? You may need to get a different job somewhere else if it's that bad, really, truly. 2, you may need to just schedule your day so that you're not overlapping. You're in a different space, time. You're just not around that person. I've not seen awesome, inspired, amazing people drag negative people up. I've seen it quite the opposite. Some of the most inspiring people have been broken, right, by people who make it their glory to keep those people's feet on the ground. So I would say you have to avoid them at all costs.
That's a really powerful point, Dan. Thanks for sharing that. Can you talk a little bit about maybe in a personal relationship, how folks can handle that?
I mean, this saying personal is what makes us know that it's something that matters, right? I mean, the reality is, we get into these things not by accident. There's an attraction, or there's a bit of camaraderie, or there's a moment in time that fuses people together, and we romanticize those moments and often overlook the dangerous impact of that down the line. And so I can't pretend to be somebody who's smart enough as a therapist or a counselor or just a wise person to give you the exact roadmap. But I will say, in every case, when I've talked to individuals after they've separated, they said, I wish I would have done it earlier. I've never met anyone who said to me, oh my gosh, I stayed with this relationship. I should have stayed longer. They all said, I wish I would have gotten out quicker. And so what I learned from that as a student is, how do I, not jettison people out of my life, because there's those people, that just jettison people. They don't like something. You're dead to me. That's not it. But how do I take the negativity out of it so that it doesn't hurt me? And that's hard, man. That's really, really hard. But look, success is for the courageous, right?
I never call her a slut. I said bitch, but that's not what.
So the other question I saw here in the group was, how do you deal with a lazy coworker, someone you have to remind multiple times about getting something done? I mean, I think this falls into that negative sort of category of just not able to perform. Those sort of people probably make you feel frustrated. What they do puts you in a negative frame of mind. And there are a couple ways to do that. I mean, of course, there's the whole chain of command. Seeing if you can have a conversation with someone who has enough authority to either move that person out of your way or inspire them to pick up the load and work harder. Or it may just be that you're a hard charger, and you're surrounded by people who aren't, and so you need to go find a different flock of friends. And it might just be a different school. It might be a different, might be a change of pace. It could be a lot of different things. Again, this goes to perspective. A lot of times we go, well, this is all I know. This is all I do. There's no other jobs out there. And we make these broad assertions. Normally, they're assertions, or I say often those assertions aren't even things we've researched. We're just repeating what someone else has said. We hear someone say there's no jobs, so we're like, yeah, there's no jobs. And we hear someone say, oh, teachers get paid crappy, so we would say teachers get paid crappy, right? But maybe there are places where teachers, or this person didn't actually say teacher, but a worker's a job where people aren't lazy. Maybe there is a job where you don't have to remind people multiple times of getting things done. Those exist. One quick story I'll tell you. I had a friend of mine who was in college with me and became a good friend, got in some debt, and literally the plant, the situation they were all working in was shutting down. And I was talking to him, and I said to him, there's got to be, this is in North Dakota or we were talking about North Dakota and how there were all these shale oil drilling jobs. So my buddy left his family at home, moved to North Dakota for like 18 months, and not only paid off all of his school debt, paid off his home, and saved like $120,000 because he said, I worked 6 days a week like a dog. All I did, but he did this for 18 months of his life. So it wasn't like he spent his whole life. He spent 18 months, paid off his house, paid off his school bills, and for him, getting away from where he was, knocking things over, getting away from where he was to this new place was the gateway for all the goodness that would come after that. And so, I think that's a lesson for all of us, is that if you want something you have never had before, you must do something you have never done before. And that comes with relationships, either new ones or severing old ones, comes with the job you're in, the people you're surrounded with, your peers and bosses and employees, and all of it. That's all choices. You get to choose all of it. And when you're frustrated, just remind yourself, I chose where I am now. You did. You chose it. And so the beautiful thing is you get millions of choices each day, and you get to choose anything. You get to choose it all. You get to choose if you stay in your job or you quit, if you stay in a relationship or leave, if you stay in your town or go, what you buy, the brand of milk. I mean, it's endless, millions of choices. They're all in your control. And so when it comes to having your own if moment, now you begin to see it's not a mystery. It's not a mystery. It's just a matter of choices, hard choices, but choices that you get to control 100%. Any other questions I can answer? Are you all fed up with my nonsense? Boy, here, going once, going twice or 3 times. Chris, maybe I should hand it back to you, sir.
Thanks, Dan. Oh, there's Chris. Oh, Chris, you're muted. I'll unmute you. There we go.
Thank you, Dan, for presenting here.
Oh, you're muted again.
Okay. Is that better? Great. Okay. I have a little trouble with my computer speaker, so I've been running out of my phone. Well, I wanted to thank you, Dan, for your talk here. That was incredibly inspirational, and I think it's a paradigm shift or really a mindset change for a lot of us, and so much value in that. So I appreciate you being a part of this, and I encourage everybody to check out Dan's site, join his mailing list. The stories are incredible, inspirational, and fun to read. So thanks again. And now I'd like to turn it over to Barbara, who many of you know and have been hearing from her for the last number of weeks. And Barbara, if you don't mind, I want to give you a formal introduction. Is that okay with you?
Okay, yeah, please.
All right. So throughout her life, Barbara has always felt connected to education and loved working with kids. She started her education career in the field of special ed. And while living in California, she worked as an early intervention behavioral specialist, and she was the supervisor of center-based services. She worked closely with families and provided services for children with a range of learning styles. She loved the idea of working in an environment where children's developmental needs were the focus of the educational philosophy, which is how she was introduced to Montessori. And she began her Montessori journey when she moved to the Washington, D.C. area. She completed both her infant, toddler, and early childhood teacher certificates in Montessori at the Institute of Advanced Montessori Studies in Silver Springs, Maryland. She worked at the Berry School as an early childhood teacher before transitioning to the head of the toddler division. She also worked as a consultant for the Institute of Advanced Montessori Studies. Barbara completed her master's degree in Montessori education from St. Catherine's University, where she focused her time on thesis on Montessori in the home and connections to parent ed. Most recently, she's been working as a Montessori consultant, where she works in both the classroom and home settings, mentoring teachers and parents. And she also works for a Montessori training center and is the co-founder of Open Door Montessori. In addition to her love for Montessori education, Barbara also enjoys spending time with her family, cooking, hiking, gardening, and reading. And as a Montessori mom to her 3 young kids, she's continuing to learn new ways to bring Montessori to the home setting, which is always an exciting challenge. So welcome, Barbara. Excited to have you talk. I've loved hearing you these past several weeks, and looking forward to what you got today.
Thanks, Chris. Gosh, if I knew it was going to be red, I would have made that a lot shorter. But
That's okay.
and it kind of took, I was going to talk about that in the presentation. So anyways, thanks. So glad to be here, everyone. I'm having a good Monday. I'm glad my headphones are working. Last week, I was doing a webinar with many of you, and my headphones stopped working. And I like literally couldn't even get words out of my mouth because they're like my little, like, they're like my comfort. So I'm glad that tech is working, my headphones are working, so I'm feeling good about today's session, and just super excited about this conference in general. I wasn't super excited to go after Dan. When I saw, Chris and I finalized the lineup, and then I saw my name after Dan, I was like, oh, I knew it was going to be a hard act to follow, because he's so inspirational. He's a great speaker. So I don't know if I can, match up to his standards, but thank you, Dan, again, for your wonderful presentation. We all loved it. So anyways, we are going to transition over to a little Montessori mentoring today, and talk about, how we build our school communities, how we build our classrooms, relationships with co-teachers, administrators, and all that fun stuff. Yeah, so I guess I'll go ahead and share my screen, right? We can just jump right into it. Why not? Okay. And then let me see, we do this. Are we good? It's amazing. Like, you think like 4 weeks ago, I wasn't doing all too much Zoom, and I wasn't, sharing screens. And if you were on my first call 4 weeks ago, or however many weeks, maybe it's been 5 weeks now, I was much more disheveled and trying to find out, where's the chat? How do I share this? How do I get audio to come in? And now we the more you do it, and the more you get pushed out of that comfort zone, getting a little more it gets a little more seamless, which feels good. We're gaining new skills in this different time. So anyways, Montessori Mentoring, Songs of Hope Conference, April 2020. All right. I spoke too soon. Now I can't even, here we go. Okay. So welcome. Chris, spoke a lot to what I want to discuss in my welcome slide, just to say another hello. Yeah, as you can tell from my bio, I'm a little bit Montessori obsessed, as I like to say. It's a way of life. I'm so passionate about it. I'm so thankful that I found it in my teaching career. I kind of just stumbled upon it, being in special education, and just happening to have a director who was in Montessori is how it was introduced to me. And quite frankly, I couldn't think of any other philosophy I'd want to teach by. So I'm just so thankful that I did come across it. And where it's brought, what it's brought to my life, and where it has, where it's brought me up until now. We started Open Door Montessori, Chris, Annie, and I last summer. We got our videos done, and we've just recently launched the first part of this, what I know is going to be a multi-stage project on our website, and just super excited about it. If you've talked to me in the last year, you've heard me mention Open Door Montessori, I'm sure, and about these videos and all that. So to see it come together, and to have this conference to discuss and work together and collaborate, is just really, really meaningful work to me. So I'm just super, super excited. Again, the mission of Open Door Montessori is, that we love Montessori. We just wish it was more accessible. So this is the first step we want to take to make it more accessible, both to teachers, to parents, so it can be accessible to more children around the world. And because unfortunately that's the one, oh, gotcha about Montessori, it's not all too accessible. So hopefully this will be the first step in it. And you know, really excited to have you guys along for the journey. It's gonna be an exciting one. And just thank you guys for being here. So I want to open up. So the way I run my webinars, as many of you know, who are on this chat, I like to make them a little interactive. So I don't like being up here by myself. So I look to the chat a lot to ask questions and get your feedback. So it can be, you know, more of a back and forth versus me just talking, because that, you know, I'm not Dan, so I'm not that inspiring. So I want to start off, you know, this by asking you all, why did you choose a career in education, if you are in education, or more specifically, why did you choose a career in Montessori? Or why did you decide to sign on today if you're not in a career in education? I just like to get everyone's, you know, background and, you know, why, what's your why? So I'll give a couple of seconds to have people enter in the chat. So Ruth says, the love I have for the little ones and just knowing you can make a difference. Claire says, because there's a happiness inside every child and I wanted to preserve that happiness and purity. Yes, that's so true, Claire. And I always feel so lucky that we can be part of that purity when we're with them and that innocence, you know, especially in times like this. So I appreciate that. Let's see. Caitlin says, children make me happy and I look forward to going to work. Sarah says, I always want to work with children. I love watching them grow, develop, and see their personalities come out. Let's see. Carla says, I love kids and making a difference. Sarah says, working with children is rewarding. Jess says, it's in the family. I have a lot of educators in my family. And once I knew why it was so special. So, yep. Thank you. Arminda says, to make a difference in children's lives. Melly says, because I like to contribute to bring up great members of society. That's so great, Melly. Dan says, I love feeling like I have some involvement in their growth and development. It makes me feel so good to see them growing, knowing I played a role in it. Yeah, you're so right, Dan. It's so inspiring. Let's see. Let's try to scroll up. Sorry, I don't want to miss it. I always like, if I don't read your comments, it's just because I missed it and I'm really bad at multitasking, so don't take it personal. All right, let's see. Wendy says, I love that I help them. Oh, I gotta scroll up again. I love that I help them start the foundation of their basic life and how much of an impact I can potentially make in children's lives. They are so innocent and pure. I love being a part of children's growth and development. Thank you, Wendy. Cole says, I love seeing the light bulbs go off. Wow. I mean, those light bulb moments, it's what re-energizes you. You could have the worst day, you could have the worst week. And then you witness that in a child and it's like, whew, okay, this is why I'm here. So thank you, Cole. Let's see. Rebecca says, because I feel like I can gain a great bond with the children. I love to see their growth throughout the months. Right. I love that. Thank you, Rebecca. Julietta says, often if you hear that being a teacher is like a child, it means having patience, knowing how to draw, having a beautiful handwriting, enjoying reading and study. I love that. Thank you. Let's see. Molly says, we plant the seeds now that will bloom later. We form now, what forms now never leaves them. Yes, we imprint so much on their little minds at an early time. Lauren says, when I started college, I was an ed major. The second she stepped foot in a kindergarten classroom, she changed her major to elementary ed. I had a part-time job at a daycare while in school and decided this is where I wanted to be. That's so great. And Nancy says, I love to see how kids can change so quickly, gain knowledge, be more social, and we are part of the process, and that's amazing. And Patricia, the children make me so happy, and I like to teach them something they will use all their lives. Yeah, I mean, being an early childhood educator, you really are. This is their foundation for their lives, and we're not just we're teaching them, you know, as we've discussed in prior, and all of them Open Door Montessori, just so much of the foundation of what they need for the rest of their learning for the rest of their life. So that's great. I love all those answers. And I always start with this question because it always seems that children, teachers choose education because they love children. It's not rocket science, right? I love to hear everyone's insights as to exactly why. But what's interesting is very rarely, I don't think I've ever asked this question, someone answered, because I chose a career in early education because I'm a great communicator, or because I'm a great leader. I know how to lead people, so I want to work with children. Or something along those lines. And communication and leadership, although they may not be the reason why you went into education, they're still skills that you need to have in order within a school community. And so we have to make sure that we're practicing these skills, that we're aware that we have to have these skills. During my presentation today, we'll have discussion as to, how we can help grow these skills and keep them alive in our school settings. So let me go over here. All right, so creating community. So yeah, we'll discuss, how do we bring teachers together? How do we work collaboratively? How do we maintain a positive work environment? And how do we allow for teacher growth and personal development? And I wanted to make sure that I added that one in there because, we always want teachers in our schools and our communities to always learn. When I stepped out of the classroom role and I became more a consulting role, and I was in multiple classrooms and worked with multiple parents in different home situations, I really began to reflect on that change in my career, because I was constantly learning something. At any time I walked into a different classroom or saw a different interaction with a teacher, there's something that I learned from that experience. Which is just, if you think of it that way, if you're just always learning, that's so powerful. And I was so sad, as many Montessorians were, that the conference this year was canceled in Dallas. I look forward to it it's the highlight, one of the highlights of my year. I love going, because I love feeling rejuvenated after, and all these ideas. And, so we should always be helping our teachers, wanting to learn, wanting to have that professional development, and wanting that urge to just keep connecting. And again, I hope that was a reason why we want to have this online conference. Even though we can't go anywhere, we can still connect, and we can still come together and have some really meaningful conversations, and we can continue our own professional development at this time. So when we do get back into those classrooms, we're just ready to be with the children and work with our teams. All right, so a little overview of just the Montessori approach to how we educate the child, right? So there's a lot of different basic principles that go into educating a child when we're using the Montessori philosophy, but here are a few, and we'll kind of break them down as we go. So respect of the child, observation, trust. We have to trust the child, we have to trust the environment, we have to trust the philosophy, we have to trust ourselves, right? So a lot of trust is involved. And I see Destiny put that in the chat just now: respect, trust, and communication. Absolutely, Destiny. We have to prepare ourselves. We have to prepare the environment first, right? So we are the ones that prepare the environment so the children can learn. We have to prepare ourselves. We have to be, as an adult, we have to be ready to work with children. And we have to have an understanding of child development. All right, so let's break it down. Observation. So this is the cornerstone of Montessori philosophy, right? So when we're observing, that's where we're getting all of our information. We're looking for the children's interests and what their strengths are. We're looking at the learning styles of the children. We're looking at different behavioral patterns. We're really looking at everything, right? To get a sense of, it gives us that information about lesson planning and our environmental design and appropriately supporting children. And that's why, I think it's just such a unique and special philosophy, because when we're basing everything off our observation, our creativity can be limitless, and we can do so many different things. Each school year is kind of like an open book of just like, wow, I can try all these different things based on what, the children need in my class right now. And I love that about the Montessori philosophy. So for observation, now let me see, I have to get my little cursor back so I can go to my next slide. There we go. Okay. And then trust, right? We talked about trust. So we have to build that relationship with the child. If there's no trust there, right? No, the child's not going to learn from us. They're not going to want to learn from us, right? So that trust is really the foundation of everything in terms of, what the connection that we have with the children. And to build trust, we have to create appropriate boundaries for our children. They look to us to create those boundaries so they know, so they can learn, where they need to stop or, where they can move forward. We have to meet the needs of the children or the child, especially with our infant teachers. We talk, about responsive care and, that they're learning, that they're being taken care of, and they're building that trust and figuring out this world, right? We want to create a safe place for the child to learn and grow. And then we provide that freedom within limits. So, we want children to be independent. We want them to be, learning at their own rate and at their own pace. However, we still provide those limits for them, similar to, as I was saying, with creating appropriate boundaries, right? So we provide that freedom within limits to make sure that we're just guiding them with enough support. And then preparation of the environment. So we have carefully chosen materials in our environments that we choose that facilitate children's learning. We create order and beauty. We know less is more. We don't want clutter. We don't want it to be overwhelming for a child. We want the classrooms to be easy to navigate. And for the young children, we want a calm and neutral environment to support concentration. And we really want to feel like it's a home away from home, that they, again, because you feel comfortable in your home, they spend a lot of hours at school, and we just want them to feel that, yes, this is their second home. And so we design it in a way to make it feel like a home through different aspects, right? Okay. So preparation of the adult. So we're always engaging in self-reflection of us, because again, if we're not ready, if we're not aware of, where we are mentally, we can't then step foot into a classroom and then serve tiny humans because that, like they say, you can't pour from an empty glass. Is that the saying? So we have to be engaging in self-reflection. We have to be present when we're in the classroom. Kind of have to leave that baggage at the door, which is really hard to do. And sometimes I say it's hard to do, and then other times I say it's really easy to do, because like I was saying earlier, we're so lucky that we get to celebrate, the children's innocence, and we can just be there with them. We don't have to worry about what's going on in the world today, which, as I think we can all agree, in the state that we're in right now, like that is such a blessing that we're allowed to do that in our job when we get to go back to it. So being present, leaving whatever we need to leave at the doors, we're not bringing it into the children. Being aware of our weaknesses and knowing when to ask for help. So that's a tough one, because we don't really want to be thinking of, what am I bad at, or what's not my strength, and asking for help can be really hard for some people. So, but it's really important that we're aware of those weaknesses, because we can't expect perfection. No one is perfect, and that's not the point of any of this, right? We all bring something different to the table. We just have to be aware of what those weaknesses are, and then on the other side, embrace and share your strengths. So know that, this is my strength, and I want it to be alive in my classroom, and I want it to benefit the children. But we have to be aware of what that is before we can bring it to the classroom. And that's what, the whole preparation of the adult comes in. And of course, respect of the child. So we show respect for the child, talking at the child's level. So we're not talking down to them. They are smaller than us. So we have to get down to talk to them, to show that respect. We're making eye contact when we're talking to them. We're using a gentle and calm voice. And we're offering help through invitation, right? So we're gonna offer that invitation before we go ahead and just assume that they need the help, or before we just go and wipe that nose. We're gonna ask, may I wipe your nose first? So it's always through that invitation to show I'm not doing anything to you. I'm gonna do something with you. So we show respect to the child for allowing for independence. And I have to move my little screen down here. And we help a child feel secure, feel appreciated, and feel that somebody is deeply, truly interested in me by the way we talk and interact with them. I mentioned this quote. I did a webinar last week on RIE, the philosophy and the approach of RIE. that infant education philosophy. And this just really stuck out at me. Somebody is deeply and truly interested in me. And that we can let that child know that just by the way we talk to them and interact with them. And it's just like, wow, like, you know, maybe early educators don't get all the the celebration that they deserve, because this work is beyond meaningful, you know, and all teachers and educators are phenomenal, don't get me wrong, but with the young child, it's like there's just so much there. So yeah, we show that respect by our interactions with them. All right, let's see here. Go on to my next one. And then of course, we have to understand the development of the child. So we study our sensitive periods, when there's those little moments of time in a child's development that's just, they're so interested in that learning that it just becomes so easy to them. And we get to just celebrate that moment with them and introduce different things in our environment to help them through those sensitive periods. We understand planes of development. And we also understand that we're looking at the whole child in Montessori. We're not just looking at their, you know, the academic side of, you know, how they're responding to lessons or, you know, anything in the classroom. We're looking at the emotional side and you know, all the sides, the gross motor, and to make sure that we're educating the whole child. Okay, so that's a little rundown, little Montessori 101, just in case anyone here or you need the refresher. Okay, so we know. Oh, let me go back. I can't. When we know this works, right? Because if you're in a Montessori classroom, or if you're in a Montessori inspired classroom, or if you know anything about Montessori, when you have these basic principles and you have an understanding of them and you're applying them, it all just it comes together, right? And it's amazing, you know, if you go through a Montessori training program, it's very intense, and for that reason. So you have that deep understanding of the rationale of, you know, why we do stuff. Okay, so there's no doubt in my mind that a lot of teachers, and just as you answered as we started this, you know, why did you choose early education? It's because I love children and it's meaningful work to me, and I love to see these moments, right? So we understand that, we understand this approach with the child, but how do we take this approach and shift it to how we support adults? Okay, so what if we apply these basic principles towards how we guide and train teachers, how we work with our co-teachers and teaching teams, or how we really just treat anyone in our community? So if you think of those basic principles, what if we put it towards adults? And how do we do it? Okay, so let's start with trust, because that's you need trust. it's the basis of everything. So how do you create trust in your school community and in your classroom? And you know, we'll talk about creating alignment. So we want to create alignment to make sure everyone in our school and our classrooms are on the same page. We want everyone in your classroom really should know how things are done in the classroom and why we do the things we do. I think it's, you know, it's hard if you walk into a new classroom and there's a lead teacher and they tell you this is what we do, this is what you should do, but you don't really understand the why, because if you don't understand the importance of it, then it won't be as meaningful, right? So always understanding this is how we do things and this is the reason why. And also reflect on that. Reflect that if you are doing something in your classroom and you don't have a reason why, then why are you doing it, right? You should always have a clear, so if anyone were to walk into your classroom and they said, like, why do you have the children wash their hands that way? You would have an answer, because it should be, everything should be purposeful and meaningful when we're working with the children. It should never be, oh, because the previous teacher told me to do it this way, or I learned from the previous teacher, or this is how they taught me in my training. No, we really want to get a little deeper than that and really understand that why. Think about just things throughout the day. You know, there should be a really, really, really clear expectation of what, you know, the ground rules of the classroom are. You know, sometimes it can feel like Montessori does have a lot of rules, like, oh, you don't do this, or you don't do that. And every time you approach a teacher in that manner that does not know Montessori, or is an assistant in your classroom that doesn't know Montessori, or a parent that doesn't know Montessori, it makes them feel a little like, oh, like a little more scared, a little less trust there, because I don't know what I'm doing. So I don't have trust in myself. So I can't, clearly I can't move forward in helping this child. But if you take the time with your team to go over every little rule, or whatever you want to call it, that goes on throughout the day, then you know you're all in alignment. So you're all going to be, you know, following that in the same way. So really breaking it down to, you know, how do we approach toileting? What do we do if a child leaves circle time? Is it okay if a child takes, you know, works from the shelf? What do we do when a child bites another child? What do we do? You know, anything. Like, you know, you can have the list and you go over that with your team and you make sure that everyone is understanding and everyone understands the rules. And I think, you know, we also have to have a description of roles. So everyone you know, again, everyone understands, you know, what's my role in the classroom. So if you have a lead teacher assistant, you know, model, if you have a co-teacher model, if you have multiple teachers that are in and out of your classrooms each day, what are the roles, and does everyone understand what those roles are? I think it's easy for some to assume, oh yeah, they know the role. You know, I'm the lead teacher, I do this, but you should never ever assume, and just make sure that that's written out, because essentially, you know, this is what provides the consistency for the children. If the adults in the environment don't have this alignment, or don't know their role, or don't understand the why as to what we're doing in our classroom, things won't come out consistently for the children, which of course is unfair to them because they're looking for that. Because again, you know, when we were talking about our basic principles to the child, we provide those boundaries for them. But if there's not consistency there, then those boundaries really don't exist. And that's when it becomes confusing. And then you have some classroom management things going on that are hard to tackle sometimes, right? So creating that alignment, going through the how and why, and just those every little detail, okay? So I'm gonna hop over to the chat to make sure I didn't miss anything. Wendy says, it's important to watch how you say something. Yes, Wendy, to your team member, anyone, so so the trust can be there, and the classroom can be in great communication, where you make sure everyone is on the same page. That's so important, Wendy. I'm so glad you brought that up too. We will get to that in another slide. Jess says, yes, it's all in the tone of voice. And I can't agree more. So when we get to our communication slide, remind me about this so we can come back to it. So Carla says in her classroom, everyone has the same role. Like they don't have roles. And I think that's great. You know, that way, you know, everyone's kind of on the same, you know, playing field. So they feel as equal. So if that's how you do it in your classroom, that's great. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way, that you should have a lead teacher and assistant, or that you should have 2 co-teachers, or you should have 5 co-teachers, whatever it is. But whatever that model is, just make sure everyone's aware of it so people can move forward and be planning and know how to interact in the environment accordingly. Okay. Carla says, we have roles, but we all do the same work. I love it. Thank you, Carla. And Claire says body language as well, to add to Jess and Wendy's point, she said. So, yeah, so that's so important. And then Sarah says, we're all important. And that is 100% true. No matter what that role is, every adult who's in that classroom is all important to the children, right? And again, we'll talk about this when we get to that slide, so I don't want to go too much into it now, but I'm glad that you brought it up so we can continue the conversation when we get there, because they're all great points. So when teachers know what is expected, know exactly what they have to do, they will have more trust in themselves, which allows them to have more trust in the environment and the children. So again, if you're always, you know, if they're always thinking, oh, I'm doing the wrong thing, or I don't really understand why we do it, I kind of just go through the motions to do this because this is what I was told, that trust isn't going to be there. But if you can outline that for them and really spend some time with your team discussing it, you'll help build that trust. Arminda says, trust and respect go a long way, and when we follow that, it makes a huge difference in the teachers' lives and children. Absolutely, Arminda. Thank you for sharing that. So, and with this, there's a lot of check-in and there's a lot of review. This is not a one-time deal. This isn't like first day, here's everything you need to know, and now we're off. And it's not now no longer a discussion. It's the complete opposite. You know, all these, when you're creating alignment, you're going over all these classroom details, it is like a garden that you need to tend to often. You need to water it and weed it, make sure it's getting a lot of sunshine, or, you know, all that. So constantly be reviewing and reflecting these things with your team. especially because children's needs change too. So maybe how your plan or your approach to how what you would do if a child left circle time was how you did it one way in the fall. Now it's the spring, and your children, you're observing different traits in your children that's not really working out. Review and reflect that. This isn't set in stone. This should always be a working document that you're referring back to, and making sure that it's still applicable to your specific learning environment. Okay. And make sure that it's just available for all the teachers to have access. Again, this is a live document. It shouldn't be, with technology, I think it's great. We can have all these Google Docs share, but sometimes, it's not always in front of you. It's in a Google file that's on your computer, so you're not referring to it as much. So having a hard copy is really, is really helpful for all teachers. And you can keep it in a classroom binder, just so you can always go back to it. You can refer back to it if you're going to have a meeting and say, oh, remember we discussed this. These are the ground rules we decided on. So we can all just, you can come back to that physical document. I think is very, very helpful to have. And what I love this idea, and this is not my idea. I did my studies, my graduate studies at St. Catherine's University, and as part of our orientation, we played this game. And if some of the teachers who are on here who've done some professional development with me know that you've played this game with me before, because I just think it's a great way to review some of the rules, or just the philosophy that you have in your classroom. So it's Jenga, and I think everyone knows how to play Jenga, right? And you have the stacking blocks. And what you can do with this to make it a professional development activity, or team building type thing, is you can get the little Avery labels, or I guess if you have nice handwriting, you can write it out too, but I got the Avery labels, the clear ones, and you type out, those ground rules we were talking about, or let me go back. Oh, no, sorry. Anything that, anything within the philosophy, whether it's Montessori philosophy or the philosophy in your classroom, respect for the child and different things that you do. And you write it out on each label, and you put a label on each block. And then you play Jenga, right? And you tap it out, and then you read it, and it kind of just it serves as a talking point to say, some people are saying, yes, I remember, just to have an open conversation of, oh yeah, this is one of our key principles, or, a part of our philosophy. Are we doing it? And if we are doing it, how? And if we're not doing it, why? Okay. And then you continue to play, and you continue to play, and you have all these great conversations that are led by the Jenga game. So it's not like you're feeling you're in a lecture, or that people are being called out on different things or being accused of different things. So you just, but what's nice is at the end, and I love this, and I remember it from my studies when St. Catherine shared it with me, is that, towards the end of Jenga, it's a little rickety, right? Because it's not as stable. And the whole point is this visual representation of every time we take something out of our initial philosophy. So if we're not doing this, or if we're kind of not paying attention to that, or whatever it is, your foundation is getting weaker and weaker. Because what we agreed upon and what our philosophy was there for a reason. And so if we're not being mindful of it, then we see that everything kind of just physically crumbles when Jenga crumbles. So I love that, and I think it's a really easy way to just get some great conversations started about your daily practices in your classroom. Good. I love that people are liking that idea. Lauren says another great way to play Jenga is in complete silence. Well, I don't know if it would work for that one, but I for this particular exercise, but I love that idea. I think I'll have to try that next time. Thanks, Lauren. Okay, so where are we? Respect. So thank you for everyone who put it in the chat just a couple minutes ago about communication, because here we are, as promised. Let's talk about communication and how that looks for respect. Sorry, my little cursor keeps going. Okay. So let's active listening. Active listening is, the definition is being 100% there. I have to move my chat over, for the person speaking to you. You are like a perfect mirror reflecting the speaker's thoughts and feelings. You fully concentrate, fully understand, respond, and remember what is being said. Okay, so we want to be practicing this active listening, and that's our definition. Sarah says eye contact. Absolutely. Want to be looking at the person while they're speaking, all important aspects of active listening, okay? that go into respect. So, you're not thinking about what you're going to say next. Sometimes we go into a meeting and we know that we're going to be having a conversation with the teacher, and in our mind, all we're thinking about, this is what I'm going to say next. You're not actively listening because you're focused on that. You're not interrupting them to make a point of your own, and you're hopefully not thinking this is stupid or boring, right? So these are all things that you want to be practicing with while you're engaging in active listening. So with communication, I'll read some of these off and then we'll go back to the chat of all the great ideas that you had. So you want to give your full attention. Again, you want to listen without planning your rebuttal. We don't want to be just always be thinking of where the point that we want to make. So I'm not going to listen to you because I need to make my point. That's not showing respect or through your communication. And we want to try to consider the other's point of view, even if you don't agree. And that's going to happen a lot. And that's the beauty of working with other people in any field or industry, but certainly in education, because it's so emotional, right? And we all have our different approaches and our different trainings and all that. And so maybe our point of view isn't always going to be the same. And I hope it's not. But you should always consider that other point of view and have, some productive conversations about it. Because, and to the next point, you honestly, but respectfully, so getting to what some of you said in the chat, express your opinion. We're not saying that in communication, you just want to, nod your head yes all the time, because that's not fair to you, and you just don't want to be someone who agrees with someone. That's not productive either, and that's going to lead to a lot of other issues, right? So you want to you want to make sure you're expressing your opinion, but just do it in a respectful way. So here, let me go back over to the chat because you had some great ideas. Body language, Claire said, right? Yeah, and your tone of voice. So all those things are just really important, when we're thinking about that communication. You want to use I messages. I feel angry when. I feel upset, when, X, Y, and Z. I don't want to give an example. Or maybe you can put an example in the chat. And don't let a problem build walls. Problems are going to occur, especially, like I said, because this work is so emotional and because we care so much about it. That initial opening question, you shared how much this is meaningful work to you. But don't let that a problem or a conflict build walls. Like, get it out in the open and resolve it, and make sure that you're constantly tending to this through conversations. Nasbin says, absolutely not to build walls, and get it out as soon as possible. Yes, I agree, Nasbin. So some techniques, you want to be encouraging. So you want to show interest. Can you tell me more? You want to ask some clarifying questions to make sure you're understanding. So when did this happen? You want to restate to check your understanding. So you would like your teacher to trust you more. Is that right? I'm always amazed if I share something with a group of people and then what they take from it. So restating it to make sure that you check that understanding, I feel, is very, very important. You want to reflect and acknowledge feelings. You want to summarize. So if I understand this is what happened, and you want to validate. Appreciate the person. I appreciate your willingness to help solve this problem. Okay. So just some key points in terms of active listening and some techniques you can use with your team when you are having discussions that maybe are feeling, a little tense, or about, trying to work out a conflict to find that resolution. All right, on to our next one. Observation. So we talked about the importance of observation with the child, right? Gives us all our information. What about observation with the adult? And I think a really important key with observation when we're observing adults in our classroom and we're giving feedback to other adults, whether you're an administrator, to a teacher, or to co-teachers, or a teacher in training, whatever that that is the power of acknowledgement. All right, so through our observations, I think it's really important as in a school community, if you take time to acknowledge people's efforts, their progress, and their accomplishments. Okay, so again, going back to the child, imagine if you gave a lesson and just one time. And then the rest of that time, and then you expected that child to do that lesson and you gave them no feedback whatsoever. You didn't acknowledge their effort. You didn't help them throughout the process. You just kind of wish you the best and I hope you figure it out, right? And with adults, like, do we nurture it the same way with adults? You know, if you are new to Montessori and you're learning it, it's certainly a process. It's not something you understand, you know, overnight. You know, I'm every day, like I said, learning new things. It's a process, and that can be scary for some teachers. You know, they're getting pushed outside their comfort zone. It's maybe something, a philosophy that they haven't, you know, been introduced to or worked with before. So it's really important when you see or you have a teacher like that in your community, that you're acknowledging their effort to say, I see you trying and I appreciate that. And that's a really powerful thing to get on the other side, because then you don't feel like you're always failing, like, oh, I'm still learning. And so just acknowledge and acknowledge the progress too. Like, oh, I saw that, you know, we had talked about this and and I see that this is the difference that you've made, and point out something specific to that teacher so they can see that and they can reflect on that. And acknowledge their accomplishments. You know, we don't have to, you know, be praising them or, you know, having these huge parties or, you know, big congratulation type things, but just, again, that just acknowledging it so they understand. And I, you know, I challenge you to do this with a coworker soon. You know, I know we're physically apart, but, you know, just to, you know, to see their response. And I think you will feel so satisfied by giving that acknowledgement to the teacher based on how they respond to it, because it feels good for everyone. And it's just when you're observing, it's a great way to build that school community. Liz L says, listen to your co-teachers and respect what they have to say, good and bad, because it's important to acknowledge each other, and building trust and respect for each other will create a positive work environment. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Liz, for sharing that. Always listen to your co-teachers and make sure you're having those conversations. Another important part to think when we're thinking about observation in terms of the adult, right? I think, you know, if you're an administrator or if you're someone who has a position in a school community or setting that does observations for, you know, formal observations for different purposes, always remember that you are in that scenario or that situation just for that chunk of time. So you could observe something, but that doesn't mean that that's what is always going on. And that's for good or bad, right? So just know that you're there for just that time. So gather information before you start taking that observation and giving direct feedback or giving direct, you know, ideas about what they should do, because maybe that's not what it was all the time. And that can be hard for a teacher and very frustrating and kind of just like defeating for a teacher when they get this observation feedback. You know, observations are to help grow teachers and allow for that time of reflection. But if something happened in that observation that usually doesn't happen every single day or whatever it is, and they were never given that chance to share, can you tell me more about this? Then they can kind of go on the defensive and take that observation feedback as negative. So, you know, asking a teacher, you know, can you tell me more about this? So I observed this. Can you tell me more? So this just gives an open option for conversation versus placing blame or guilt or accusing a teacher of something. Just here, tell me. And it was one of the first things I had to learn myself as a consultant to take this approach, because I couldn't believe how much more information and how much more productive conversations were after I started with this question versus jumping right into an observation that I had. Okay. So, and again, we do this with the child. You know, if we're a teacher, we do this with the children. We don't assume with the children. We're observing from all angles. We you know, see children at different stages. So we have to do it with the adults as well. Elizabeth Campbell says, I love the analogy of giving a lesson and walking away. We give the children the opportunity to make mistakes because that's how they learn. Repetition is key. We need to give that grace to adults as well. Yes, that's so true. You nailed it, Elizabeth. And, you know, I think in one of my slides I talk about, but I'm not 100% sure, is that opportunity to make mistakes. right? I guess that can go back into our trust category for the adult. If an adult feels trust, they're going to know it's okay to make mistakes, and that's a really important part of your teaching journey. And if you're part of a school community that you're scared to make a mistake, or then you won't grow. And that we have to be repeating these things and reflecting on them, and we definitely need to give ourselves some grace as well. I completely agree with that. All right, so preparation of the environment. So we know how we do this. We did I did a little review of how we do this for the child, but how do we do it for the adults in our schools, our communities? And a lot of this is about creating space to talk. Meetings are so important. We have to have meetings so issues don't blow, issues need to be talked about so they don't snowball into something else. And then we have something way bigger we need to approach than if we had just had that opportunity for a meeting to go over things. So weekly team meetings and reflections, or daily check-ins with your teachers has to be part of your practice. And it's just, it's so important. To make meetings more successful, you can, think about having an agenda so that, the child can, that the teacher can, teachers know what to expect when they go to that meeting. Okay, this is what we're going, so they can prepare themselves. Some teachers aren't great on the spot, so they don't know how to share their different, thoughts if they don't have the agenda first. Be sure to keep time. Some people like to talk a lot, and that can eat up a lot of your meeting time, and then it takes away from that reflection. And some people talk very little. So being mindful of time and just telling the group that we're going to be mindful of time, and this is what can be helpful to help manage that. And then at the end of each meeting, make sure you're setting goals and you're envisioning a plan. There's nothing worse than coming out of a meeting and feeling like, well, that could have been an email or don't really know where we ended with that. We want to make sure these meetings are feeling productive, right? And that we have that plan. And then always the follow-up. So when you write out that goal, you envision that plan, your next meeting should be, okay, so last week, this is our goal. Let's follow up on that. How did we do? So we're holding accountability and make sure that, we are seeing it through. Let's see. Miriam says weekly meetings with talking about what has gone right or wrong is so helpful. Reflection and growth go hand in hand. Yes, absolutely. We're not just reflecting on all the things we did wrong. Like that would be so depressing, right? And we would never grow. Look, let's celebrate some things that went right. Our circle time today was awesome. The kids were engaged. We had fun. Take time out to really reflect on those things that are positive in your learning environments too, so you can build each other up. So some of my techniques when I think about creating this space for meetings, and I look at that as, kind of preparing the environment for the adult. If you've been in any of my meetings, I like to start with a positive or gratitude or a sharing joy or some type of appreciation, especially if you're walking into a meeting that might be a little hard, or there's a topic that might be a little more difficult to talk about because teacher's not happy or whatever it is. When you can set the tone for the meeting or whatever it is by starting with that positive, it does help to guide a more productive conversation. Learn about your team members. Know what their favorite snacks are, their coffee drinks or treats they like, or TV shows they watch, because we want to be able to connect with our team and have those, those conversations, or, those different levels of connection. And, some bathroom baskets. I had a co-teacher that would always have a nice little bathroom basket set up. And it was quite refreshing to be with toddlers all day. And then you just had this nice little basket that, you could freshen up a little. And it's those little joys throughout a toddler teacher's or preschool teacher, infant teacher's day that just helps to keep you going, right? And quotes. I know some of the teachers on here love quotes. You hang quotes in different areas of your classrooms, on staff mirrors or places that you won't really expect it. It helps to just, again, refresh that mentality. Tiana says, learning about your team members is such a great way to build positivity in the workplace. Love it. Yes, absolutely. All right, here we are, preparation of the adult. So support and community. So how are we a supportive team member? When you're part of a team, you want to make sure that everyone's supporting the leader. because when you're not in vision with what the leader or of your organization, then things really start to crumble, because then you can't encourage your team members. You want to be sure that you're on board with that mission of what your team is doing. You want to be part of the solution and not the problem. I love this one. You want to commit to each team member's success, because that's building them up. And I think sometimes, teaching can come, I don't want to use the word competitive, but very personal, right? Oh, I do things this way and it works, right? Or, well, this works for me, I don't know why it doesn't work for you, type of mentality, right? But that's not committing to another team member's success. We want to make sure that we're building up every other teacher around us, because that only makes us stronger too. Want to avoid gossip. Gossip is so easy. It's so easy. For whatever reason, it feels good. We can vent all we want, and somehow that takes away the pain or the annoyance in that very moment. But it doesn't solve any problems, and it's certainly not supporting any team members. Show mutual respect for team members. Appreciate their talents and contribution for everyone. So saying thank you goes a really long way, and it shows that your appreciation. And asking you, what can I do to make your job easier? If you see that a teacher's having a hard day, please ask them this, because hard days when you're a teacher, especially for toddlers, and then you have parents that maybe are upset with you, you don't really have anyone on your side, and that feels lonely and discouraging. But if you're having a hard day and then your co-teacher asks, how can I help you? What can I do to make your job easier? I guarantee you're immediately going to feel this relief of thank you. Like, yes, like that you're going to start to feel better. So just remember that when you see a teacher having a hard time. And then make sure you have, create multiple methods of communication. So you maybe writing through classroom notes, you're sharing observations, you're having your team meetings, obviously email is a big part of how we communicate within a school community. So having all those different ways to communicate, so you know that you are available to talk. And teacher development, doing this over. So we talk about those sensitive periods for children, right? But there are also, those exist for teachers as well. And we want to make sure we're understanding those. So, a sensitive period, like a new teacher who's eager to learn, like make sure you have a great onboarding process that's informative. So when that new teacher does come in and wants to give it 110%, you're taking advantage of that time, just like we would with the child and their sensitive period for movement or language. We just want to really emphasize that time to make it very meaningful for everyone. Get to know every teacher in your community, their personality, because everyone's different, just as they should be. Again, it would be terrible if we all had the same personalities. That would not function, and it would not serve the greater community any good. So we all have different personalities, but get to know those personalities so you can react and respond appropriately. Ask how they prefer to receive feedback. And be mindful of different learning styles. Some people are really visual. They need those concrete examples. And some teachers, you can say it to them one time and they'll get it. Or some teachers, there's just different learning styles, and one's not better or worse, or one's not right or wrong. Again, they're all different, but let's just be mindful of them so we make sure we're serving all those different learning styles for our teachers, just as we do for the child. We know children have lots of different learning styles, and that's why most of us probably chose Montessori, so we can serve those different learning styles, and the same should be applied to the adult. If you're in a Montessori community and you have non-Montessorians work with you, make sure you're taking time to explain definitions of Montessori terms, because there are a lot of, it can seem like a different language sometimes. If, the first time you hear sensitive periods, we know what that is, like no one else's business, but someone who doesn't know Montessori does not know what a sensitive period is, nor do they care. So it just seems like, what are you talking about? So just make sure, I don't know if you want a little definition list or something, but think, what's follow the child? What's freedom within limits? What's, planes of development? All those things that we as Montessorians love to chat about all day long. We can't assume that everyone knows them. So just make sure that people in your environment understand them. Make sure that you understand your teacher's strengths and interests, and ask them where they need support. Because like I said in one of my earlier slides, a lot of times teachers will not want to ask for support because it's hard to accept what our weaknesses are. So go take that, take the initiative to ask, similar to what I just said in the previous slide, how can I support you? Is there anything I can do to help them with that? All right, where's my little cursor here? Okay, so the goal is to educate the whole child, and we want to support the whole adult. So, and as always, just remember why we are here. Going back to that very first question, why did you choose a career in early childhood? Most all of you said to support, guide, and positively impact the development of the child, or something within that realm, right? It was about the child. So always remember that we are here for the child. So any decision that we're making is for the child. It's not for a personal preference because it's easier for a teacher. It's not because it's easier for the school or they can save money. Everything is here for the child, and all decisions should be made for the child, okay? And I believe that's all I have. So, I know I only have 5 minutes left, but I was engaging with the chat as I went along. So hopefully if you had questions, you got to ask them. But I would just, love to take this time to answer more questions, or for, since we're here as a community, share some things that you personally do to help build your community at school, that you've seen is beneficial to you, or something that someone has done to help you grow and develop as a teacher, because that you remember that as a teacher. You remember those mentors you had. You remember those people that really helped you, and what was it that they did specifically. I would love to hear from you in the chat with the remainder of time that we have left. I need to take a sip of water. I'll scroll up through the chat too to see if I missed anything. And if I did, feel free, if I missed any of your comments, feel free to pop it back in the chat, because like I said, I'm not great at multitasking, so I might have missed it. Let's see, Vanya, is that how you say your name? I apologize if I said that wrong. Says, thank you. I'm studying Montessori and working in a nursery, and this was a great summary for me as a leader. Well, I'm glad, and congratulations on your Montessori studies. I hope they're going well, and I hope you continue to enjoy and learn. I am interested to see how we all come back as a community after this pandemic and after COVID-19. I don't know when that will be, and I know this uncertainty is very stressful for everyone involved. But I do think it's going to be a time of, a deeper understanding of we are all, we're in this together. And so the only way to be in together is to help each other, right? So I hope there's more of an emphasis on creating that community, and mentoring different teachers if you in your classrooms or schools or whatever it is. And I'm also interested to see what the parent-teacher relationship is going to look like after we all come back. I mean, the world's not going to be the same. So it's going to be really interesting to observe that, and then, adapt to hopefully what I hope will be positive changes. Let's see. Go over here. Nancy says, when I met you for the first time, what impacted me was your peace. Thank you, Nancy. That's very nice. And the way you interact with kids inspired me to be more relaxed and calm down. You always will be available and show support that I need. Well, thank you, Nancy. That means a lot. And again, it's nice to hear that, because certainly in my quarantine days, I don't think I'm just playing as much peace as I used to, because it's like, oh my gosh, we need to get out. But so I appreciate that acknowledgement. It means a lot. Thank you. So Elizabeth Campbell says, we juggle all these concepts with children on a daily basis. Exactly. As Montessorians, we are always thinking these key principles with children on a daily basis, and we need to remember to apply them to all relationships. The beauty of Montessori is that's applicable to all the time, if we remember, right? So this is not just about the relationship we have with the child, it's about everyone else. And that's why I start the presentation by asking, why did you come into education? And it's, again, about the child, but there's so many other strengths and skills that we need to have as educators that are not always on the forefront of our mind. Oh, Gareth says hi. Hi, Gareth. Wendy says, I really appreciate that in my classroom, most of the teachers are able to express their opinions and feelings on what we need to do in the classroom or how we're feeling about it. We have worked hard to find the peace and trust in my classroom, and I enjoy that. We have, for the most part, got to that point with each other. That's great. I'm so happy that you have that in your class, Wendy, because it really is such an amazing feeling when you have that cohesiveness and what that brings to the classroom as a whole. If when you start to teach, for multiple years and you have that, you reflect back on, oh, that was a tough teaching year, that was a really good teaching year, or that was a tough teaching year, but thank goodness I had my team, whatever those reflections are. When you can remember that piece and having that team with you, it's such a great feeling. And we wish we could carbon copy it for all of our classrooms, but we can't. And so when we are in situations when we can't, you can hopefully use some of these tools to help guide you to get on that track of how do I get this cohesiveness back and have that peace and trust in the classroom. Oh, Jess, this is such a great point. Jess says, sorry, I have to scroll up. I think it's important to remember that it doesn't matter if it's your first year teaching or fifth, you can learn from everyone. Thank you, Jess. We should all have the mentality that we're constantly learning. You never get to a point of your teaching career that you're just like, well, I learned everything, so I'm good, and anything you have to say doesn't make sense. That doesn't exist, right? So everyone is learning. Just like I said, every time I walk into a classroom, every time I hear a speaker, listening to Dan, you learn something new, or you have a different reflection or a different viewpoint, right? And that's learning. So that's why professional growth within professional growth within a community is so, so important to emphasize and to encourage, because we always want teachers in the mindset of learning and being curious, just like we do with the kids. We never want the kids to stop learning or stop being curious, and we need our adults to be the same way. All right, we're at 2 o'clock. So thank you everyone for your participation on the chat. I love, again, it's just, it's hard that we're not physically together, but it's nice that we can connect virtually. And I'm so excited that we have the next 2 weeks to continue to do this. We have so many great different topics that are, can pick our brain and help us reflect. And I'm really looking forward to it. And thank you for being a part of this session.
Well, thanks, Barbara. That was excellent. Appreciate you joining with me and hosting this and to be speaking today.
Yes.
That was wonderful. Well, I want to make everyone aware that for tomorrow, our schedule will remain the same. So 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock, and we have speaker Cecilia Anakama, who will be speaking from the United Nations. She is a child protection specialist with the UN, and we'll be talking about a lot of her work and the inspiration behind what she does. I'm very excited to hear her. And then we'll have our own Phil Berman, who will be presenting as well on bringing hope into the classrooms through music. So excited to hear Phil. And for the rest of the week, we'll be having some other great speakers on Montessori, on movement. We'll be having some leadership. And then next week, we have a full schedule of folks from here in the States, as well as speakers in Spanish. So we'll be featuring Shirley De Leon, who is a RIE teacher and runs a company called Baby Story. Barbara mentioned RIE today in her presentation. And we'll have Rafael Roman, developer of the challenge method, and we'll have many other great folks. We have the CEO and founder of Play Shifu, which is a technology company out of India, Dinesh Advani, who will be speaking. Frank Lido created his own music methodology, and folks like Letty Rising, who's a Montessori elementary teacher and works with homeschooling groups all around America, as well as Trillium Montessori, and Derek Teongo, who was one of the keynote speakers for the planned AMS conference down in Dallas. So great things ahead. Really excited for these couple of weeks here. So thankful for everyone that's participating and working with Barbara and myself to be able to bring this to all of you. Thanks again to Dan for his inspiring speech today as well. So encourage you to share this with others. This is a public event. We want as many people to be able to take advantage of this great opportunity. So if If you want to share it with your friends, your family, other educators, other schools, they can log in at opendoormontessori.com. And if you want to take your experience further, you can enroll yourself in our free Open Door Montessori self-paced course. We will be launching a moderated course with folks such as Barbara and Annie, who will be leading everyone through the course, and that will launch in May, and we'll make that information available as we have it. So thanks so much for participating. We appreciate you all being here, and we look forward to a great week together. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.